Sage HCM 26 R1 release webinar. My name is Steve Tompkins, product manager here at Sage. I see there's still some few people joining, but we're going to go ahead and get started. Of course, we're recording so that we'll be able to share this video with other folks out here. We do have some panelists here to answer questions. So if you do have questions, please feel free to use the chat. And we'll try to answer your questions. I'm going to go quickly because we have a lot I want to try to cover today, and try to go into depth in some of the things so that you can understand those things and pass them on to your customers. I will note that with this version, the POC environments have been updated. So you should be able to see these same enhancements already in your POC if you have one. If you don't, please reach out to us and we can make sure that you get set up with a POC if you'd like to demo the system and use it. But let's go ahead and get started here. I'll go ahead and share my screen. Okay, so this is self-service, and you can see here the agenda I have planned for us, very ambitious agenda to try to cover everything that was in the release notes. So the very first thing I want to talk about is the UI and UX design improvements. Now, some of these we've already brought in with the 25.4 release when we changed the color schemes and the menus and so forth. What we've done now is in many places in the system, when there was not something to show, we just had a blank screen. So we've gone ahead and kind of fixed that issue there so that, let's say I go into the settings or something like that, it actually shows that it is kind of intentionally blank, that there's nothing to show right now. So let me show you an example right here. So you'll see this throughout the system, in self-service and other things like that. It'll tell you when there is instead of being blank, it's going to show something like that. So if I go to here, you'll see no records yet. And of course, once I hit add, this will go away and it'll show a new payroll batch as an example. So this will be throughout the system. You'll see this. And we think it helps to add clarity about this rather than just having a blank screen. We also have some changes in the mobile app, which we'll discuss. One of them being a new app icon, which kind of is a homage to the old Criterion logo. So we're adopting that for the Sage HCM mobile app. So you'll be able to see that in the system here, and you'll notice that throughout the thing. I think it helps to clarify what's going on and let people know what they need to do and why they're not seeing something. It's not because they don't have access or something like that. It's because something hasn't been created or stuff like that. All right, so that's the UI and UX design improvements. And like I said, you'll see that throughout. For example, if there's no notifications, there'll be one over here and stuff like that. So that's what that's going to look like throughout there. Another one that is available here in self-service, but also within the mobile app, is the external links, which is this right here. You'll notice here I have a folder called company, and then I have some links that are established underneath that right here. So you'll see those right here in the external links. This is something very easy to configure. So if you've ever set up the external links, of course, what you can do is type in a few letters and see where it is. It's under general, in case you're not aware where that is. But when you come in here, you can add folders. So to add a folder, you right here, click, and you add a folder into the system here. Call it whatever you like. As you can see, it's just give it a name. I recommend something descriptive and unique rather than, like, I wouldn't probably want to have 5 folders called company because that'd be very confusing. So create those there, and then you can drag your links into the folder. So you don't set them up by like clicking into the settings or when you create a link. What you do is you drag it in, just like this. As you can see, I drag API information in, and it's going to ask you, do I want to move? And it moves it out there. And if I want to move it back out, I can drag it back out into there or to another folder. So as you can see, I can move it out. So very simple to do that. If I create a new one, it doesn't ask me which folder. I create the link and then I drag it in. And then of course I would see that in self-service. I just need to hit refresh if it's not already showing, and it'll start showing up. All right, so very simple, but I think a very nice improvement to the UI for this and also the mobile app. All right, moving on to human resources. We've added more support for preferred names. That's going to be on the demographics, but also throughout the system. We'll be using preferred names. So, as an example, if somebody has a preferred name, sometimes you might call that a nickname, but preferred name is what you'll see in the system there, and that includes both first name and last name. That'll be visible on the demographics. You'll see your preferred first name and preferred last name. All right. And the system will use these if they're populated in places like the employee lists and the org chart and stuff like that. You'll see that in the mobile app and so forth. So we'll be using this. So as an example, I don't have a preferred last name here, so it's just going to go back to my last name field. I do have a preferred first name, so we'll use that instead of the first name field. All right. So, like I said, a pretty straightforward and a nice feature there. We've got a lot of feedback on the preferred name, and so we've added this preferred last name field for that. All right. Let's look at the onboarding and some dynamic dates around onboarding tasks. So, if you've ever created onboarding tasks, this is an enhancement to the way we have excuse me, the dates that are there in onboarding. So again, I could just type in ON, but it is here under HR administration. Okay, and you can pick your onboarding task list or create a new one. Now, it's going to be available down here in your different tasks that are going to be in your list here. So when you're doing this here, you'll see how I can have when it is due. Now, the way that it used to work is this was due 5 days from whenever this onboarding task list was assigned to the employee, which could be a problem, especially if you hire them and they don't start for a few days. They may have tasks that are due before they even set foot in the building and start working and log into self service. So now this can be using something like the hire date. So you might say this is the hire date plus 5 to get that due date there, or rehire date. So you can use something like that if you would like to do that there. And let me show you an example of how that works there. Just give me 1 second here. Um, Hang on one moment. I apologize. I thought I had thought I had it ready to go here. Oops, where did my screen go? So what you can do here, let me add a new task into this here. And if you've never set up an onboarding before, these tasks are really throughout the system, being able to do things in here. So when you do this here, first thing, of course, is what I always do is I set up everything except for the name, because the name will populate based off of what you're doing here in some situations. So let's say there's a form you need them to fill out or something like that. You can come out here, select the form, and it'll populate the name of the form in there. So if I choose, let's say this code of conduct, you'll notice here it populated that. So even though it is the first field there, I always actually do that as kind of like the last thing I do. You'll see here is the due dates. Now I don't need to put anything. If there is no due date on something, I just want somebody to do that particular item, and they need to fill out, a form, but I don't have it's not due on Friday or 30 days after they're hired or something like that. I just would like them to do that. You can leave it blank. So it's not a requirement to fill in that date there. I will mention here the sequence. So this which controls the order and that it shows in self-service. So as you go through and, say, okay, I want this to go first or second or something like that, it will allow you to have that order, that priority that works with that. So that's how the sequence works. Now, if there's two things that happen to have the same sequence, let's say there's two things that are 1 or 5 or something like that, it'll just go by the order that they were added. So it will um, it will show the first one from the first list or the order they are in the list here. So that's kind of how that would work there. And so here would I would have due dates, and I could say something like at hire date plus 5. And it will use that hire date to determine when the date is assigned to the employee. And when I'm saying that, if I go to an employee record, and I go to their onboarding is actually under advanced profile here. This due date here would be calculated. Now I can override it. Now, obviously, these are a couple of years old, but it doesn't really matter. You'll see here there's a due date there. This is already completed. That's why I can't override it, but I can override this date if I needed to change that date for them. All right, so that's how that would work. If I manually add something, of course, I can put in my own date to them, but here's how I can override. I can just type it in or use the calendar there. So that's the due date that it's talking about. The employee would see that in self-service when they go to onboarding here. So when I go here, now he's already completed his onboarding, but it would show a little due date right here next to it. It would say, June 1st or something like that as that. And then, of course, there might be reminders that are associated with that they need to complete that onboarding task. Expense report attachment previews. So what this is for is when you have expense reports and you have attachments to them, in the approval of that, the manager or whoever is charged of approving it can see that expense report attachment without having to download it. So if I go to an expense report, and I believe I have one. No, let me see if I try to find one where I do have one. Shoot. I thought I had one attached to one of these up here. Let me just go to the pay dates here. Should have been more organized in remembering which one I have. There's the cash reimbursements. I know I've got one. Where I got it. Anyways, I would be able to see the preview of this right here rather than downloading. So previously I would have to download it to view it, but now I'll get a little preview icon so I can open it and see the preview of that. So I would see that on the approvals and available both in self-service as well as in HR. So if I go to the person's person's expense reports over here in payroll, I'd be able to see those attachments. Here's another example of that UI. I'd be able to see those attachments here. All right, so I can see the preview if I had one right in here. All right, so that is that example right there. A couple of changes to workers' comp. So you'll see here workers' comp priority and formula updates. So what this allows you to do, and then also see income exclusion. So currently and previously, we can attach workers' comp codes, of course, to like the location. So, they're in this specific state. Let's say they're in California, and the project's in California, or the employee's in California. Maybe there's no project at all, but there's a certain workers' comp code and rate for that state. So that is an example right here. As you can see, I've got ones for Nevada, California, Washington, Oregon, et cetera. When I'm setting these up, I can choose the state right here. Now, of course, if they're only in one state, you don't need to do this. But if they are a multi-state company, or maybe they send employees out of state to work, and so they need to have different rates for different states, it can use this. Now, you can set this up on a project. This is nothing new, where I can go to a particular project and I can set up the workers' comp code for that project. All right, but frequently what happens is that you will have different tasks with different workers' comp. So a perfect example might be a carpenter. And depending on the work they're doing, the tasks that they're performing, they might have a different workers' comp code. So even though they might have the same, job title throughout, they're always going to be a carpenter. When they're doing this particular task, they might be doing, like finishing. And so it has a certain workers' comp code attached to it. They might be doing, rough-in, and that has a different workers' comp code attached to it. So this allows you to attach it at the task level. Now, what this does is it would override what's on the project level. All right, so it takes precedence over that. And of course, it's also going to override what's on their position. So when we're doing all this stuff, it's going to look at that there, the position, what's on the employee. Let's say they've got, carpenter on there. If on this particular task, it says this is the finish and it's got a certain workers' comp there, it's going to ignore anything on the project and ignore anything on the employee's level. And of course, it'll still reference what state they're in. So if it's that finish, carpentry, and it's in the state of Washington, it might have a certain rate. Finish carpentry in the state of Oregon has a different rate or something like that. All right. We also have added a setting into the income codes to allow you to exclude the income from workers' comp. So on any income code, let's just say military, let's choose jury duty here. You'll see right here, exclude from workers' comp. So you simply check that box. And what that means is that anytime we're paying out this code of jury duty, we're not going to charge workers' comp, or, it's not going to be included in the reporting and the calculations. All right. So you would need to go through, excuse me, and update the income codes where that is applicable, and make sure it is set up that way on an income code by income code basis. And of course, the income codes are set up per employer. So if somebody has multiple employers, same income code, perhaps you would have to go to both employers and set that up. All right. A couple of optimizations. This isn't something I can really show you per se in the system, so we'll just talk about that. So if you're using horizontal timesheets, when those timesheets are submitted, we've streamlined the request at the server level, and it improves the performance of the submissions, especially when there's a lot of tasks for employees. So you should see a huge improvement there when you're doing the submission of the timesheets there. And then really throughout the payroll processing, we've optimized things like generating payroll reports, doing the journal ledger entries, downloading documents. Everything is significantly faster there. And now the performance will be very consistent from, very small companies. So if you got a company, with just, or you say a small number of employees, it doesn't matter if you have a small number of employees or a large number of employees. We've really helped reduce the time it takes to do those post payroll processing tasks. Okay, and then a couple of updates for the UK. If you're familiar with UK taxes, the taxes updates on April 1st. So, of course, we've updated the taxes for the 26-27 tax year. And then we've also added support for Student Loan Plan 5. So those are both part of the payroll. Again, that's not really something I can show. It's a tax update, and it's applied if you have a UK client. All right, for submitting timesheets that have project level approvals. So when you're doing your approvals, you can set up on a project, and let me show you here, a project manager. And that project manager can be in charge of the approvals for time against that project. So if I go into this particular project here, you'll notice that I have project reporting. I currently have one configured here called project supervisor. If I selected somebody as a project supervisor, let's just say it's this person, I might say that they're going to approve all the time from any employee who records time against Evergreen at the Meadows. All right, let's talk about where that's configured. How do I set up a project supervisor, or at least that name of project supervisor? We're going to start in the code tables here. We'll go to users, and you'll see down here it's going to say project org structure. So the reason why you saw project supervisor, because that's my org structure 1. Very similar to the org structure for employees. So I might say project supervisor, foreman, timekeeper, etc. You can have 4 of them if you need to. All right, they would show up on the project. The reason I only saw 1 is because I only have 1 configured here. Once you have that configured, of course, you can assign it on the project level, but you also need to have it in your approval workflows to use that. So that would be in my timesheet submission. Now, in my example here, it's going to this person. However, you'll notice right here where I can say this going to the project org type, and I can say org type project supervisor. Now, I might have multiple. Perhaps I have like a verifier and an approver. And so maybe it's like level 1 is timekeeper and level 2 is project supervisor. Now, this is how you configure it. What happens now is when that timesheet is submitted for approval and that supervisor goes in to review that time and do their approvals, they will be highlighted. So they'll be clear that these are the hours that they are approving. So if I was to be looking at a timesheet, let me bring up a timesheet here, and I had somebody whose time was across multiple projects. So let's just say it was Alpha Project on Monday and asbestos removal on Tuesday. The project manager for Alpha Project, this would be highlighted for them so they know that they're approving these hours on Monday. Now, of course, maybe they have some hours on Wednesday. They would show highlights on Monday and Wednesday. So make it super obvious to them what hours they're approving. Previously, it was I thought obvious, but not super obvious. You would have to kind of get used to the fact that, yeah, that was my project. And I kind of had to look through it a little bit to make sure. So it wasn't impossible, but it wasn't as obvious as it is now. All right, so that's the project timesheet submission highlighting, and that happens in mobile as well. And I'll show the mobile and some of the updates over there a little bit later. All right. Another thing we've added is reattestation of timesheets if an edit is made. So, as you may know, when somebody clocks out, you can have an attestation at the end of the day to say, you agree that you had no injuries or illnesses or accidents while you were working today. So that happens when they clock out. So if I were to just start a clock here, let me just do that real quick. I'll show you where the setting is. And you can do this. When I clock out, it'll show me a little attestation message. Now, where do I set up that message? That is on the timesheet layout. So if I go to my payroll admin and I go to my timesheet layout, there's going to be a new setting here. If you've seen this before, there will be a new setting right here that says on time updates. So this was here before. We've actually enhanced this a little bit over the last year or so where you can have it in different languages, but this is the message that's going to show up. I had no reportable injuries or incidents today, and I could have it in different languages. So if you want to put it in French and Spanish and Arabic, you could do that. Here you'll notice where if somebody says no to this message, it requires them to put a note in. This is optional. You don't need to have this setting here, but I have it. This is the new setting. What this means is if I go in after the fact and I change the hours, of course, that now I'm attesting to the new hours that I have, put on my time. So it allows me to reattest for that. So where does that happen here? Let me show you first off the attestation. If I clock out, this is the attestation message. You just saw the setup, and you can see here, I had no reportable injuries or incidents today. I could say no. The notes now become required. You see the little red star there. So I have to put in, I hurt my finger or something like that. Now, when I hit OK here, I've attested to that. If I come in later and say, you know what, I really got to here at 7:21 and not 9:21. So I'm going to go ahead and make that change. You'll see how it popped up this new thing. That's because this setting is enabled. You don't have to do that, but it does allow you to do that in that situation. All right, could be very important if the attestation is something that you need to track very closely. And of course, we are saving this information into the audit trail, so you're able to see that information there. All right, now if I change, let's say, the project, it is not reattesting because I didn't change my hours. I'm still saying I work from 8 to 12. Nothing has changed there. And there's not going to be any attestation required because I didn't change anything. All right, so those are the changes for attestation and the timesheet. Let's talk about a couple of schedule changes here. So first off, when assigning shifts, I can now assign multiple employees at once. So previously I could just select one at a time, which, certainly if you're adding, let's say 10 employees, it might get a little tedious to go one at a time, do that 10 times. It wouldn't take all day, but it might take a little bit longer than you would like. So now when I go to scheduling and I go to my assignments, you'll see here I have the option to select more than one employee. So let me go to my Sage HCM company here. I don't have anybody scheduled for this week. Here's another example of that new UI. Let's say I want to assign several people to this alpha project. You'll now see there's a checkbox over here where I can select more than one person. Previously, I would just select one person at a time. So now if I want to assign these 3 folks to it, you'll see here 3 people selected. I can hit clear to uncheck that, especially useful if I've got it over, several lines. I'm not sure where everything is. But if I do this and I add those employees, it's now going to add all 3 of them. All right, so very simple, but I think very useful addition right here within the scheduling. Now, the other thing with scheduling is that sometimes schedules change. And if you've published, which is a function that we added, I think in the last release, you probably want to let your employees know that their schedule has changed. So there's a new notification out there that if I change their schedule, and let me publish this here because I think this is where. Okay, so Gary here is scheduled this week. Let me publish this. Okay, so let me go ahead and change this here. I'm going to go ahead and add something in on Friday. and I will get a notification. Let's just say he's going to work from 9 to 3 o'clock. Okay. All right. So now I'm going to get a notification that my schedule has changed. So first off, I would have gotten a notification that my schedule is now available. Now, the notification is, as you can see here, the schedule for this week is now available to view. So that's the notification because it was published. So I would see that, and then the fact that I changed it or added something in there is going to cause a second notification to go out to myself in this example here. Now, when I'm doing that there, I can choose where it goes. So I may not want it to go into self-service. Maybe I want it to go to SMS and mobile or email or whatever. You get those choices there. That is done in your notifications. So these should be turned on by default, but if not, you might want to double check these things. What I did to find it easily is I just typed schedule up here. Certainly I could have scrolled down, and here you'll see where I can turn them on or off depending on how it is. So if I want to turn them off completely, I could turn off both the publishing and the update, or maybe I just want the publishing on. I don't want the others, but this is how I could do that. This will turn them both, and that works for those columns here. So maybe I want to do SMS. I don't care about ESS, but I do want to do the push notifications. I can toggle these however I like, but you'll want to make sure this one is enabled. And then you can, of course, update that. All right. And then if you want to see the actual notification, you'll go to your notification layouts and you can see it over here. So this one's going to be under scheduling. You'll see here's both of them. I'll go to the updated one. This is the default messaging. Your schedule for the week of, and there's the schedule start date has changed. Please view in self-service and mobile. Now, this is, of course, the email notification. This is the SMS notification. This is the ESS notification, and this is the push notification. All right. So if you change it, you probably want to review all four if you're using all four. Otherwise, there might be like an inconsistent message. All right. And you'll notice here is a new token called schedule start date. That is the week of the schedule. So in my example, I think it was the 19th. It would say my schedule for the week of the 19th has changed. You'll also see here we have a table. What that would do is it would show all of the changes. So if I changed Monday, Tuesday, and Friday to different hours, it would show those in a table. That only is going to show in the email because there's a lot of detail. We have space in the email to fill it. SMS, we're limited to the number of characters. ESS, it would look strange in self-service to have this like grid thing with all those different things on there. Same thing with the push. We don't want to flood the whole notification, take up the whole screen. So we just made it simple. And you would just see that it has changed. And then of course they can go into self-service or onto mobile and they can go to their schedule and see whatever it is. All right. So I now can see that right there. All right. So those are the two scheduling changes. Let's look down here under performance and compensation. It's really about performance in the 9-box grid, but it's performance and compensation. So the first off is just some changes in the display of this and just making it look a little bit better when you're looking at a completed performance review. So currently, and the way that we print the report looks really nice. So if an employee were to go to their performance reviews, and I'll just pick this one out here. If I were to print this, the formatting is really nice, very easy to read. And I can, as you see here, I can download. This is a PDF. And so it's a nice little PDF of that performance review. You'll see how it looks, pretty nice, pretty easy to read here with these boxes kind of explaining where everything is and the calculations and so forth down here at the bottom. This is now very close to what they're seeing now on the PDF. So what we've done is we've expanded out these things like with the description and the comments. We've put labels for the different sections. So here's personal goals, as you can see, goal attainment, personal goals. If there were any company goals, they would be separated out. And then you'll see the competencies down here. So really cleaned up the look of this here to make it match more closely to what they're seeing on this screen here. All right, so I think a great improvement into this. We want to thank several of our clients for providing that feedback on this. We had a whole cohort that got together and gave us good feedback on this to clean this up. So that is one area that we have cleaned up in the performance is the display of the performance review after it's completed. Now, another area that we have cleaned up is, or enhanced, is around the goals themselves. And this is on the reviews. When you're setting up a review, you can now collect things like goals, but maybe not include them in the scoring. So here you'll see an example. I have this one called annual review here. And there's now a new setting where I can tell it to include the goals, either the personal or company goals, in the overall score. All right, so you'll see here, if I don't want to include it, I don't need to do that. It now is showing me my weighting, and it's ignoring what was in my personal goals. It basically set it to 0, but it won't show it at the bottom either. And of course, I would need to rebalance this, because if I look at 60 and 20, of course, it's only 80. It needs to be 100%. So I would need to do that right there. So very simple to do that. I can still collect the goals and do that type of stuff there, but maybe it doesn't impact the overall score. I don't want to show it down at the bottom. So that allows you to do that right there. Let me just make this 40%. So you can see I can save that. Now, how does this look to the employee when they're in self-service, or the manager who's performing that review? So let me go through that here. I will go up to my performance reviews right here. I'll click on Harrison, who's somebody who's reporting to me. And here you can see I'm his manager, and the details about this. Of course, he has his personal goals up here. So to improve accuracy and timeliness in AR processing, and you can see, nice description of that. And here's strengthen collections and customer communications. And there's this right there. Of course, I've scored it here. I've made it whatever my goal, rating is here. You see those. Now, when I go down, you'll see that the personal goals are not here. And of course, the fact that I, had scores there, it would have been 66%, I think, is that I one out of, or 2 out of 3. It's not affecting anything here. So basically, I've hidden those here. I'm still collecting the data. So if I want to report on them or use them for analytics or something, I can still do that, but it's not affecting the overall score right there. The other thing that we did is sometimes there would not be goals on an employee. And previously that was treated as a 0, versus saying, okay, well, there were no goals, so let's not include that score in there. So we've fixed that as well. So when they don't have a goal, it's not going to use the weighting for that goal section and basically penalize the employee just because there weren't goals. So that is an update we did. It's not, you don't need to do anything in here. I don't need to say don't include it. It's just automatically not going to include that score as being 0 just because they have no goals at all. All right. So what I'm talking about is if I go to maybe another employee, let's see if Jack. Okay. So he doesn't have any personal goals. It's not going to basically penalize him for not having any personal goals. All right. So I'm just going to give something here. Go back into this and just reload it. Okay, so if I go through and I give him really good scores on everything, should have had this part prepared, but that's okay. You'll see it's giving him a 0%, but it's not lowering his overall score there. What it's doing now is it's saying, okay, we know this should normally be 60%, and this should normally be 20%. This should be 20%, but he doesn't have anything here. So we're going to rebalance this. We're going to say this is now 60 out of 80, and this is 20 out of 80. So in essence, this is now 75% of the score, and this is 25% of the score. So it's going to look at that balancing right here of the weighting. If there's no personal goals or there's no company goals, it's going to summarize the other two that are still remaining. So 60 plus 20 is 80, 60 divided by 80 is 75%, and 20 divided by 80 is 25%. So it'll recalculate this, won't penalize him for having a 0 here, and give him an accurate score right there. It'll still show 0% because there was nothing to score, but it's not changing his overall score and giving a lower score just because he had a 0 there. All right, so that is another thing. It's not a calculation you can easily show out there because it just does it in the back end. but that's available there. All right. So that is an example of how that works there with the performance review goal scoring. And I was doing it to the personals, but the same thing could apply to the company goals. So if I came out here and excluded the company goals, again, I'd have to rebalance this. So it had, let's say 60/40, or whatever I want it to be, and then it just wouldn't show in the bottom. All right. And I can also, of course, turn off both. And of course, this now needs to be 100%, but still collect the scores. And it just doesn't affect the overall score. Okay, so the next thing is under the 9-box grid. So probably if you've been with us for a little while, we've gone through several enhancements to the 9-box grid. I think it looks really great right now, and it of course is very configurable. So let me just show it on the over here. We'll go to the 9-box grid in admin. Of course, if I'm a manager, I can view a 9-box grid. So there's a lot of configuration that you can do in the 9-box grid. For example, you can change the colors, you can change these labels out here. And of course, if you need to have your employees on there, I can show the employee names or not. So there's a lot I can do as far as this is concerned. But what we've now added is the ability to export this. All right, so I can export this information out to either a PDF or Excel. And you'll see here is the option. So when I choose this, I can choose PDF or Excel. All right, and then you'll notice there the sorting by. So how do I want to sort it? By position or department or something like that. And I'll go ahead and hit export. Okay, now when I do this, what you'll see here is, of course, this is here showing, the same grid, the same colors and everything you just saw when I was viewing it in the system. But then we break it out a little bit down here. So you can see here's my poor performance, high potential employee. All right, this is where that sorting comes into play because I told her to sort by name. You'll see here it's by last name. So good performance, especially obvious down here when to go to get good performance, high potential. So here's my folks here sorted by their last name. Of course, I could have done it by position or department. So it is showing the detail behind that. So if you wanted to see it broken out, you can do that right there. And then let me go ahead and show that in Excel as well. Again, I have those same sort options, and this is going to go out to Excel. All right, let me give you an example of what this looks like here. Just give me one moment to change my screen around to show my Excel. Okay, so here it is. Here's the grid. Now with this one here, we are limited. We didn't just make this continue to grow, and be huge here. So if you had, let's say, 50 employees in here, you're not going to see like this weird, 50 lines in good performance, and then maybe some of them only have 2 lines or something like that. So we do have a maximum that this will fit here. As you can see, it's I think 7 employees will fit in here. But here we have now different sheets for each one of those boxes. All right, so very similar to kind of how the PDF was, except for now it's broken out into these different sheets here. All right, and now if they didn't put their employee names, it won't do these different sheets. So if I just did the numbers, it's going to have just the numbers there. It will only have the first sheet, which had the grid itself. All right, and this is available in self-service as well, so you can see that over there. All right, now back over to all right, so back into the system, and you see the 9-box grid here. So you may have noticed I got 7 here, and I think it was showing 6. So that's what it did there. Now you may question, like, how do you get the people into the grid here? Because there's not a button to add them. Once they're here, you can change this information. But if I wanted to put somebody there who is not, now the manager can do this, or I can do this in HR. I'm going to just go and select some random employee here. And let me just pick Lawrence here. All right, and then it is now, I believe it's under performance. Yes, so under succession planning is actually where this is located. You'll see these 2 boxes right here. All right, so once this has some information in there, and let's say he's good and medium, now this person will show up in the 9-box grid. I can remove this information. So, if I filled this in and I say, well, I didn't really mean to put this in for Lawrence, I want something else, I could do that there. But this is how they get populated. This is something the manager can do in self-service as well. So you'll see here a team 9 box grid and team succession planning. So this allows me to go to my employees, and as you can see, it's showing on this grid. Maybe I want to go to Eric here, and I'm missing something. I want to say he's good performance and low potential or something, and I can do that right there. All right, so now he would show up on the 9 box grid with that information. So that's how that's updated on the employees. You'll see that right here under succession planning. And then of course, now if I go back to my 9 box grid, it will show that information, those folks on here. All right, so I can do that. And you know, as you can see here, I can like narrow it down. Like if I only want to look at accounting or something like that, I can, do that right there. All right, so that's the 9 box grid, and that's the enhancement we did around 9 box grid. All right, some new fields here in applicant tracking, some new things that are available in applicant tracking, I should say. So first off is Indeed has some certain requirements around the salary that is shown. We cannot show a different salary on like the career site from what shows up on Indeed. And what that means is when we go to recruiting, and let me just click on this account director as an example here. What we had before is now I only have salary range here. Let me go to one where I haven't published it. I think this one I haven't. So what we had before is we had a description, and you could type in whatever you want. So you might say, let's just say 70,000 to 80,000. So this is clearly text. I'm typing in, whatever I want in here. But Indeed has fields. So they have 70,000. They have a numeric field for 70,000. They have a numeric field where I type 80,000. We had a very hard time taking text like this and pulling out the values so that it can match up to what would show in the career portal. So in the career site, it would say 70 to 80,000, depending on experience. But then Indeed, a lot of times we could parse it and pull out the numbers. We were able to do that. Sometimes people would put in, they would write out a number versus putting the numbers in. They might put in $20 an hour and actually spell that out. Well, we have a little bit harder time there. Or they might put in, other text here, and we need it to match. If it doesn't match, that's a red flag for Indeed. So what we now have are a salary range where you can type in 70,000 to 80,000. Oops. All right, 80, 800. And then I could say in here per year, per mile, whatever it happens to be, I can put in a value over here so that it would show that. So this now will show on the career site as 70 to 80,000 per year. It'll ignore this. It's not going to show that on the career site. This will just kind of read only show that right there, but it'll show this on the career site. So that there's no mismatch as far as that's concerned. And then on Indeed, it'll show 70 to 80,000. Now, if I have published to Indeed, I cannot choose the salary description at all. I don't have that option anymore. And let me show you what I mean by that. When I publish to Indeed, and I go back to the job posting, I have to hit save here. I won't have the option to do the description anymore because you don't have that option as far as Indeed is concerned. Either you could say no salary at all, which may or may not be legal according to like what state companies are in and stuff like that, or you have to put this in. Now, there's a few things here. If, let's say, the company wants to say it starts at 70,000. So that might be the starting salary. They don't want to put a maximum in here. If they leave this blank, that's okay. You'll notice here it is not a requirement. When I put in 70,000 to blank per year, it'll say starts at 70. I think it says starting at $70,000 a year. And that's exactly what it will say on Indeed as well. It'll show that on the career site. So it'll say starting at $70,000. If I put in like 70,000 to $70,000, it'll just say $70,000 per year. So we do have some logic behind this in that it will read what's here and choose what it shows on Indeed, but it's always going to match exactly what's going to show on the career site. Now, of course, you don't have to publish to the career site if you don't want to, but if I do have them both published, it will show the same on both. And let's show you an example what this looks like here. See how it says $70,000 a year, all right? Because it says 70 to 70. If I change it to 70,000 like this, I thought it said starting, but it says from $70,000 a year. And of course, if this was per hour, it would say like per hour, per month, per pay period, that type of stuff. That depends on what I select in the drop down. And of course, if I put a range in there, let's say 70 to 80, it'll show that on the career site. Now, I can't publish to Indeed because I don't have, like, this is not set up to do that way, but this is what it would show on Indeed as well. So this ensures that it matches. It ensures that the client is compliant with Indeed's rules. They cannot show a different salary on a career site like this as they show on Indeed. That'll be a red flag, and their posting would get taken down from Indeed. So we don't want to have that happen to our clients. So that's what we've done right there, is to have that field there. Now, if they're not posting to Indeed, don't need to worry about it because they won't have a salary. They can type in whatever they like. All right, so that one, spent a bit of time on it, but it's very important to understand that one. Let's talk about mass publishing, and then we'll talk about the candidates preview. All right, so you may have seen before there were these different check boxes that you could check over here to do different things like cloning a job posting. But now you'll see there's a new button here that allows you to publish. So what this is doing is I could say I want to publish to whatever job board is selected for all three of these. Now, if it's already enabled, it's not going to change anything about it. But let's say I hadn't published to the career site for one or more of these, it would publish to the career site or to the criterion communities or to Google or whatever it is. It will allow that to do that right there. Let's say I do a private requisition. Here I can republish, which would replace the publishing. But now it has updated all three of those to have a private requisition. If I go into journeyman electrician as an example, you'll see that private requisition is here. Now, it may have been enabled before, but you'll notice the date is here. So probably was not enabled before because there it is. All right, now I can't unpublish there. I can only publish, but that's how I can do it in mass rather than having to go into individual ones and do that way. All right. Now, the next one is the candidate attachment previews. So previously, what you had to do was to download the attachments if there were any attachments on an employee or a candidate. So we've fixed that problem there. So let me go in. Let me just see which job posting. I want to make sure somebody has an attachment. So let me go to account director here. And I want to show you there. I was playing around. I just can't remember now which one has attachments, and they may not have any. Let me just go to somebody who's not hired. Let's go to Frank Smith. I will add an attachment if he doesn't have one. So let me just quickly. All right, now it has to be shared with the hiring manager, of course. So if the hiring manager can't see it, or they cannot preview it, but here you can see an example of the preview of that. All right, so whatever that attachment is, I can see that right there. And that then means that the hiring manager, when they go to their candidates, and I go to Frank, and I go to his attachments, I don't have to download it. Now I can preview it. All right, so nice little enhancement there. Previously, downloading it, it's not impossible to download and view them, but just one extra step, eliminated because they can preview it right here in the system. All right. And a couple of things before I go to the mobile app here in the last 10 minutes or so. We do have a couple of new reports. Well, I should say a new report option, but also a new report. So I'm going to skip this just for now. I'm not ignoring my mobile app developers and stuff like that. I just want to go down here first while I'm in the system. So here's employee address label report. So under HR, we now have a report for the employee address labels. And okay, so you'll notice here different templates, 5160 or 5162. You can choose whichever one is the appropriate one for the particular report you want. And of course, whatever other options you may want to do here, maybe let me just do it by the accounting department just to make this a little easier. And There you go. So you'll see here, I now have this address, one address labels in the format, I think it was 5162 I chose right there, or 5160. So very simple to do that. And of course, you can then have different filters and everything like that. All right. And then finally, for payroll reports, what we've done there is many times we find that people export the payroll reports because they want to view them in Excel. Now, certainly they can export them and see them in a PDF format. So you might come out and, run a report here. Now, a lot of these are already kind of formatted for a grid. They're kind of laid out in columns and rows, but some of them are not. And so what we've done is the ones that are not, we've optimized them so they export better to Excel. Um, so when I do this, of course, if I do PDF, it's going to show on the screen here. Let me just pick a pay date and run this report. It's going to show on the screen here. Now, this one is not a great example because it's already kind of a grid, but it does export better out to Excel now. So instead of just taking this PDF format and exporting it out to Excel, it will now be formatted for Excel better. So like instead of having the name here and then the rows, it's going to be better exported for Excel. So when I go to my options here and choose Excel, there'll be an Excel version which is optimized for Excel. And now it doesn't show on the screen. I have to go out to Excel to see it. And I'll wait for that to happen here. Now I know I down. I got too many windows open. Where did it go? All right, so let me show you an example of that. Remember what the PDF version looked like, how I had like Gary on just one row. And so you would have to go in previously and like copy his name to several rows. Well, now we've eliminated that need there. All right, so it is nicely formatted for Excel, so you can easily do like your sorts and everything without having to copy information down and do. I always had like an if statement saying if this was blank, read this value. I had to do that, and basically I saved templates and then I would like copy and paste in. This makes it much easier because it's already formatted that way. All right, so that is all the reporting stuff. What I want to do now is I'm going to switch over to the mobile app. So you'll be able to see what that looks like here. And let me share my mobile app. All right, so this is my iPhone. Of course, the mobile app is universal for iPhone and Android, so it'll look the same on Android here. So first off, and I can't really show it because I'd have to go back to my home screen, and I don't think you need to see all the icons on my phone. But we've changed the icon for the mobile app back to, like I said, kind of an homage to the Criterion logo. It's basically like four circles. If you remember the Criterion logo, it looks like that, but it's black and white. So I like it. I think our team likes it as a reminder of our roots here. Now, this didn't really change as far as the look and feel of the system here. One of the things that did change, you'll notice here in the menu. So previously they were little circle menus. This is more of the Sage standard here for how we want our icons to look with Sage. So that is a little bit of a visual improvement as far as that's concerned. So you can see that there. All right. One of the things you may notice here, if I go under benefits, is life events. So this wasn't here in mobile before. So you previously had to go to self-service to do a life event. Well, now you can do it here in mobile. So it makes your life a little bit easier as an employee. You don't have to go somewhere else. If you're already doing everything else in your benefits, you might as well come here to be able to do your life event. So, come here, plus hit add. It's got all the same fields you see within self-service. So let's just say they got married or something, and maybe they need to attach a copy of their marriage license and add in their new spouse as their new spouse. So I can select their spouse and add that person in, or add a new person in if I don't have that spouse already included. All right, so very simple to do that, and then submit is going to go through the same process as it would in self-service. So if you have an approval on life events, it would go to that person or people that need to approve it before maybe it starts a enrollment for that life event. All right, so nice little add in here into this. Okay. Um, let's talk about recruiting real quick. So we've added some things in recruiting here for the hiring managers. So I'll go to this account director one as an example and being able to see my candidates here. Let's go to Frank here. And there's some new things that are available in here. So when I go, of course, this is not new, but when I look along the top here, there's more available. Now, I don't know why when I show on my screen here, I can't scroll over, but I can click and scroll. On your phone, you can actually use your finger. It doesn't work here when I do this little share, but I can see the discussion, which I couldn't see before. I can do some other things in there that I couldn't do before. So really, everything that's available in self-service as far as the candidates are concerned, if I'm the hiring manager, is now available here within mobile. So if I needed to do that type of stuff, including if there were any attachments, should be able to see that. Oh, here's his resume, so I can see his resume. Now this was available before, but the resume is there. Any forms that he's done, I would be able to see that. And maybe I didn't share the attachment with the hiring manager. That's why I can't see it, but I'd be able to see those over here as well. All right, so I can see all that information there. All right, so that is an example of that and how it can work there. Of course, here's that position, so I can see all the detail on that position if I need to, and any attachments for that position. All right, so that is the recruiting updates in there. Now, the things we talked about as far as, let's say, the timesheet reattestation. So if I come in as the manager, as the employee, and go to my time and I enter my time, that reattestation is going to happen over here. So come into here and again, change my time, let's say to 7:21. When I apply this, the reattestation is here. So really it's about duplicating and making sure that whatever is in self-service for employees is available here within the mobile app. We have enhanced the offline mode. So there, it was a little spotty before in previous versions. That has been, we've done a lot of testing and improvements in the offline mode for the mobile app. I can't really show that because if I go offline, you'll lose connection to my phone because it'll be offline. But that'll be available in there. The other thing is if you're using segregated security profiles for mobile. So a lot of times we have administrators who might be doing something, let's say in recruiting and something in HR or payroll, and it might mean that they get access to different employees. So within HR, maybe they can see everybody. Within payroll, they can only see a certain group of employees. When they're looking at those employees or those screens within the system, and I would see that I'd be able to switch my segregated profile. There's something you can do in self-service where you can select which profile, and then it applies the settings for that one. Same thing now works here within mobile. If I had segregated profiles, I can switch between them by clicking on my, sorry, somebody called me. So I apologize for, well, thank you, person, for calling me right here at the end of my my demo here. Here we go, reconnect. How inconvenient for somebody to call me when I was presenting on my phone. Um, let's see if it'll reconnect. There we go. All right. So where was I? Oh, the segregated profiles. There's my wife. You can see her there, and I don't know what happened. So I apologize. That person who called me, they really threw off my little demo here because it disconnected my phone. All right, let me get out of here. So the segregated profiles, what I would do if I'm in there, I should click the home button, is I could click here to switch. All right, so there's that there. Here you'll see an example of that preferred name. So I can see that here within mobile. One last thing is, of course, the inbox. These are the approvals and stuff. So we added last update approvals for incomes. So if I add a new income to somebody, I can have an approval. Like an administrator can approve that change to the income code. We've added that here as a thing you can do through your tasks. So just like I can do approvals for, other things in here, income codes is now supported. So again, this is all about just duplicating what you can do in self-service here on mobile. And, we've caught up on all those things there. Those links and stuff like that, the folders are here.
So again, this is all here. And this will be available, of course, when we go live with our release here. So let's talk about that here. I know we're right at the top of the hour. Got a little bit delayed there because somebody gave me a call. But here's our current release plan. I will say the release date may be pushed. That's currently scheduled for right after Stage Future on May 4th. If everything goes right, then that will be the release date. We are going to have our webinar tomorrow, same time, but tomorrow for our clients. You're certainly welcome to join. I'm going to try to cover all these things again, maybe not in as much detail because I did run out of time here. If you have been attending or you're interested in attending the learning series, here's the upcoming schedule of events there. I realize that you know one of those is next week during Future, so probably not every partner is going to be able to attend. But if you're not going to Future, we're going to be doing surveys next week on Thursday from 1 to 1:30 Eastern, and then offer letters. And then we are going to be, I think, covering some of the things that happened in this release as we move into later parts of May and June. All right. I want to thank you all for sticking around a couple extra minutes here. And I do want to, of course, recognize our fantastic development team and everybody who's gone into all the fantastic enhancements out here. We also value your feedback. So if there are enhancements that you would like to see in the system, you may or may not know you can do that in admin. There's a customer feature request portal. We encourage your clients to use that. If you happen to be at Future next week, I'm going to be there. Come talk to me. I would love to know what you think we need in there. I'm not going to promise everything will be delivered, by the next release, but I do need to know what we're missing, especially if it's a competitive situation or something like that that's preventing you from selling. So please find me. I'll be presenting quite a bit, but I'll also be in the Sage area. So please come and look for me. But again, thank you everybody for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you all tomorrow or seeing you at Future next week. Thank you so much.